Executions by firing squad are back on the book. Utah would become the only state, along with Oklahoma, where the backup method would be a firing squad. Two other states, New Hampshire, Washington State, have hanging as a backup.
It's your boy Sansan, and we back with another reaction with Sansan, the Grand Strand Murders edition. Today we're going to be talking about Brad Keith Sigmon, the South Carolina death row inmate who chose the firing squad. Sigmon was the first inmate in South Carolina to be executed by the firing squad in modern day history, and the fourth in the U.S. since 1977. All four of the other firing squad executions were in Utah. All right, let me give you a rundown of this case real quick. On April 27, 2001, Sigmon showed up at Armstrong's parents' house. Armstrong was his girlfriend, with a plan that he hatched while doing crack cocaine the night before. He was going to tie up David and Gladys Larke and kidnap his ex, is what he told police. Instead, he beat the couple to death with a baseball bat, hitting each of them 9 times according to the police and the medical examiner's report. Sigmon kidnapped Armstrong in his car, but she jumped out of the moving vehicle and was able to escape, though Sigmon shot her once in the foot before the gun ran out of bullets, according to the court documents. Sigmon had always admitted to the guilt, telling the jurors at his 2002 trial that he had no excuse for what he did, saying that when Armstrong fell out of love with him, it set him off. But before we get into the video about Brad, let's take it back a little, like 9 years ago. Back in Utah. Y'all know, but it's your boy Sansan. Make sure you like and subscribe, man.
Executions by firing squad are back on the book. Governor Gary Herbert signed a law that authorizes the method if lethal injection drugs are unavailable. The move comes amidst a nationwide shortage of such drugs. To discuss how the new law would work and other states eyeing similar moves, we're joined by Jennifer Dobner. She's justice reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune. Why did the Utah legislature pass this new law, and why has the governor signed it?
Well, like other states, Utah is recognizing that it's difficult now to get the drugs needed for lethal injection, and also that there have been problems with lethal injection elsewhere. So I think they wanted to put something on the books that would allow them to reinstate the use of the firing squad should it become necessary. It's been a secondary use for capital punishment since 2004, but this sort of adds a new condition under which it could be used. Previously, we were at a default to lethal injection unless that had been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court.
So in this instance, though, as I understand it, if the drugs are not available for 30 days, then the state would resort to the use of the firing squad.
That's correct. And currently the state does not have any drugs in its possession. So if an execution was imminent and we couldn't obtain them, then we would default to the firing squad.
Jennifer Dobner, tell us just briefly how this works, how it's worked in the past in Utah.
Well, I witnessed the execution of Ronnie Lee Gardner in 2010, and it's carried out by a team of 5 marksmen. They use a match set of 30 caliber Winchester rifles, and the condemned sits in a black metal chair about 25 feet from a wall that has a gun port in it. The rifles are handed out randomly to the team of shooters, and those folks, I should say, are by statute anonymous. And then there's a cadence countdown to a moment when they all fire. The condemned is strapped into a chair. Hood is placed over their head if they choose.
We understand that it's only law enforcement officers who can be part of the firing squad. And
that's correct.
And it is the case that they're all given bullets, but one of them is given a blank? Is that right?
Yes, there's 4 live rounds and 1 blank, and the rifles are handed out sort of in random order, so no one knows who's getting the live round and who's getting the blank.
So, Andrew Novak, we know there are 32 states where the death penalty is legal. We know that Utah would become the only state, along with Oklahoma, where the backup method would be a firing squad. 2 other states, New Hampshire, Washington State, have hanging as a backup. And then there are 5 more states that use the electric chair as the backup. In addition,
I did not know they were still hanging people. New Hampshire and Washington State, that's 2 places I won't be moving. And I'm about to get my ass the hell up out of South Carolina, too. And to each his own. He murdered. I mean, he's going to get what he deserves. But that's left up to God, not the people.
Let's take you to South Carolina now, where a convicted murderer will be the first person executed by firing squad in recent history. This comes after a 2024 state Supreme Court ruling that execution by firing squad is not cruel and unusual punishment, as inmates can choose their method of execution.
The hell it ain't.
The other options are lethal injection or the electric chair. Brad Sigmon, who murdered his girlfriend's parents back in 2001, chose death by firing squad. His execution date is set for tomorrow. His lawyer asked the South Carolina Supreme Court to delay the execution and to give Sigmon time to reconsider the method, but the court rejected those efforts. Let's bring in CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit Senior Coordinating Producer Anna Schechter. Thank you so much for being with us, Anna. Can you tell us a little bit more about this case and why he chose to have a firing squad execution? Sounds unusual.
It is unusual, Liz. In fact, this hasn't been very rarely used, but he chose it because, his lawyer told me just a couple of hours ago, because there have been so many problems with lethal injection in recent years. In fact, a couple of his close friends that he calls brothers who were on death row with him recently were executed by lethal injection, and it took at least 20 minutes for them to die. There have been a spate of issues with this around the country. In fact, it's the most botched method used in this day and age. It was, of course, introduced in the 1980s, viewed as a more humane way of carrying out executions. The other method, which was actually the default method currently in South Carolina, is the electric chair. But his lawyer cited issues with burning, mutilation that can come from that, and cited the age of the electric chair that is used in the state. And so he picked the least bad option according to the information presented to him.
He picked the least bad option. Hold up. There were 3 options. The electric chair, lethal injection, death by firing squad.
And that's according to his lawyer. We have reached out to his former girlfriend, the daughter of the 2 people that he murdered and admitted to murdering. It was a brutal case back in 2001. We have not heard back from her, but she did tell USA Today that she wants him held accountable, but does not agree with the death penalty. And I want to play a little bit of sound from his attorney from our conversation a bit earlier today, where he talks about the realities of choosing this method of execution. Let's take a listen.
Knows what the firing squad will do to his body. He knows it's going to break his bones. He knows it's going to pulverize his organs. And it's a measure of how impossible the choice was here, because of all the information about lethal injection that was concealed, that he's chosen this.
So that was his lawyer, Bo King, and what he's talking about there about lethal injection and the information that's concealed is he and his client were not able to obtain details about how the poison that is administered during the lethal injection was kept, at what temperature, was it properly kept in a cold and secure environment. And so without that information, his lawyer says he chose the method that he was least afraid of, despite just how violent the method is, Liz.
Yeah, the details of these executions are grim there, Anna. Do any other states allow for execution by firing squad? How does it work?
Yes, there are 5 other states that do allow for it. Utah is the one where it's been used most often. Almost all of the executions have occurred in Utah when they've been done by firing squad, but it is very rare when compared with the other methods like the electric chair and lethal injection. So this is very rare, and there's a lot of attention. And I wanted to bring up the state of Idaho because there's actually a bill going to the governor's desk where death by firing squad could be the sort of main default way of carrying out an execution in that state if that bill is signed. I think this is a reflection of all the problems that we've seen with lethal injection, and I think it raises the question as a society about, do we want to do this? The Trump administration has expressed its support for the death penalty in general, and it is available to prosecutors to seek in more states than it's not, in 27 states in the United States. So a very unsettling story to think about, and a reminder that execution is set for 6 p.m. tomorrow, and the governor can intervene. So it is up to the governor. He is the sole person who could step in and stop it tomorrow.
This is big right here. And I don't think many people see it. It's not just about Sigmon. It's about the world as a whole. This is a bold statement right here. Death by firing squad. It ain't looking pretty at all. And they still got stakes hanging. What is that going to look like in 20 years? It ain't looking too pretty. It ain't looking too pretty.
All right, Anna Schechter, thank you so much for that report. A South Carolina inmate was executed via firing squad Friday evening, the first such execution in the United States in 15 years. 67-year-old Brad Sigmon chose to be killed by a firing squad, which was legalized in South Carolina in 2021. However, lawyers representing Sigmon say he only chose that because of concerns regarding both lethal injection and the electric chair. Sigmon was convicted in the 2001 murders of his ex-girlfriend's parents. CBS News correspondent Meg Oliver joins us now from Columbia, South Carolina for more, and a warning for people, some of the details they may find disturbing. But Meg, how did this rare execution go?
So, Lindsay, it played out shortly after 6 o'clock with a hood over his head and a target over his heart. A firing squad executed Brad Sigmon. He was pronounced dead at 6:08. This is 4 years after the state of South Carolina's legislature approved this option for death row inmates.
Meg, what does this mean for future executions in South Carolina?
Right now, Lindsay, that we know that, inmates have this option. And now that it has been put out there, South Carolina is only the 5th state to include firing squads. The state of South Carolina maintains that this is not cruel and unusual punishment because they give death row inmates the option to choose. If they don't make a choice among lethal injection, the electric chair, and now a firing squad, the default is the electric chair. Whether or not we are going to see more states follow suit remains to be seen at this point.
Meg Oliver, thank you.
Thanks for staying with us here on Live Now from Fox. As promised, that press conference is getting underway of the South Carolina inmate who was set to be executed by firing squad. Let's listen.
The execution was performed at 6:05:50 by a 3-person firing squad and he was pronounced dead by a physician.
They say this is not inhumane because they give inmates the option to either get the electric chair get lethal injection, or death by the firing squad. But hold up. They said if they choose neither, then they can override and give you death by firing squad. So how do you have a choice?
At 6:08 p.m. Sigmon, 67, was sentenced to death in 2002 for murder and burglary in the deaths of David and Gladys Larke. Sigmon used a baseball bat to beat the Larks to death in their Greenville home, April 27, 2001. Witnesses to the execution included 3 members of the Larke family, a representative from the prosecuting solicitor's office, a representative from the Greenville Sheriff's Department, Sigmon's attorney, Sigmon's spiritual advisor, and 3 members of the news media who will address you now. Jeffrey Collins from the Associated Press.
My name is Jeffrey Collins. I'm with the Associated Press. That's JEFFREYCOLLINS. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of walk you through what I saw today. So the curtain opened. It was about, looking at my notes, around, it was about 6:01, maybe a little bit after that. And the curtain opened. Brad Sigmon was strapped into the chair. Unlike other executions I've seen, he was in a black jumpsuit, had black Crocs-like shoes on. He was completely strapped in. It looked like there was a harness over him. There was a strap over his head. His ankles were shackled. He had a covering over his mouth that, was from about here down. When the curtain opened, he looked towards his attorney, who was on the front row of the witness. They kind of exchanged. They had an exchange. I couldn't tell because his mouth was covered what they were mouthing back and forth to each other, but it looked like he was just saying he was okay to his attorney, Sigmon did. At that point, they had the attorney came out and read the final statement. When the final statement was read, well, let me back up one step. He had a target over his heart when the curtain opened. It was already there. It was a little rectangle white paper, or I'm assuming it was paper, could have been cloth. They had a bullseye on it. It had one outer ring and one inner ring on it. It was red. The bullseye was red. So they came out, read his final statement. At that point, when that was finished, the prison employee got a hood, put the hood over Sigmon's head. Then that prison employee walked from the chair the 15 feet over to where there's a brick wall, and at that point there's a black shade, like one of those shades that you pull down and it rolls up. So there's a black shade there. The prison employee lifted up the shade, and then from that point, it was a little less than 2 minutes of nothing at that moment. I mean, you could see Brad Sigmon took several pretty deep breaths, and then suddenly the shots rang out at, I believe Christy said it was 6:05 and 50 seconds. At that point, you did see a small red stain on Sigmon's chest. It was irregularly shaped, but oval, if that makes sense. I mean, like it wasn't like a circle, it was an oval shape. I saw, it looked like he may have taken a couple of, his chest rose and fell about 2 times immediately after the shots. You could see a tiny piece of like tissue or something that was coming out of that. At that point, also his arm tensed up when he got shot. There's kind of this brief moment of tensing. After that, the doctor was in there fairly quickly. Less than a minute after the shots came. Couldn't see exactly what the doctor did because my viewpoint was blocked from his back, but he did an examination for about 90 seconds, and then he walked back towards the other side of the room, walked from left to right as I'm viewing, and then that's when the prison employee announced 6:08 is the time of death. And the only other thing I might add is when they came out after the shoot, they pulled the shade back down.
All right, as you see there, we've been listening in after the post-execution press conference there, after the man on your screen there, Brad Sigmon, the 67-year-old convicted murderer, was officially executed by firing squad there in South Carolina. We do want to remind you when we show you these things, as you can see there on the bottom of our screen, viewer discretion is advised, as some of these details that come out of these press conferences can be quite graphic.
Well, death by firing squad is back on the table. Soon they'll be hanging. And soon, this world is going to be chaotic. More chaotic than it has already been. But what do y'all think about South Carolina implementing the execution by firing squad? Y'all tell me what y'all think down below in the comments, man. Y'all know what it is, man. It's your boy, Son. And we out.